Okay, guys, let's talk about some of the global reactions to Trump and his win in the 2024 presidential election. So, in many cases, it's pretty mixed, but let's start off with maybe the most important one. The first leader to congratulate Trump on his reelection victory was Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, and that's important for a number of reasons, guys. Number one, in 2020, Prime Minister Netanyahu actually congratulated Biden. Was one of the first leaders to do that in a time that was very controversial in Trump's eyes because Trump believed he had won, and he believed it was a slight from Netanyahu. And honestly, he held that grudge against him for many years after the fact. So that's pretty interesting to note. So Bibi congratulated Trump, and it's interesting to note, guys, because Trump's position on Israel, of course, is very hawkish, many would say, and the Netanyahu administration definitely was hoping for a Trump victory in terms of perhaps they would be more lenient in some of Israel's military actions against Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, etc. So that's one thing of important note. Israel likes a Trump victory, and very different in the Iranians' eyes, which the Ayatollahs definitely do not like the Trump victory. They believe it is, potentially a threat to their regime, and you've seen that with many of their rhetoric coming from their leaders. A foreign minister today said that, we're open to some sort of negotiation with the Trump team, kind of conciliatory, looking to tamp down much of the rhetoric here against the United States, probably because they know that Israel could be unleashed by the Trump administration. Now, another concern here in the Europeans' eyes, for the most part, I think the Europeans are not thrilled about this, guys. And this is because in many cases of, Trump's kind of been unwavering on Ukraine, or excuse me, he's been wavering in some of his white rhetoric on Ukraine. It's unclear whether or not the United States will continue to support Ukraine. Trump has said many times that he'll end the war with Ukraine and Russia during his transition. So we'll see if that's true or not, but that's what he said. So we'll see if that turns out to be true. Secondly, he's talked about NATO and, flirted with the idea of withdrawing from NATO. I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but at the minimum, he said that other foreign countries need to increase their military spending in order for the U.S. to commit with its spending. In fact, we've seen, and who knows if it's related 100% or not, but we've seen the UK, for example, the Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer, already announced that they're going to increase their military spending budget by 2.5%. And this comes right after the Trump victory, which is very interesting. So I think it's possible you see military budgets increasing in many of these European countries in order to convince the United States to maintain its commitment to NATO. And he's questioned NATO many times in the past. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not Trump's kind of all talk on that front, or whether or not we'll actually see maneuvers to withdraw from NATO here. In my opinion, I don't think we'll withdraw, but I think there'll be a lot of rhetoric, in order to try and get other European countries to increase its spending. Now, in many cases also, in the case where the U.S. is withdrawing its commitment to NATO, it leaves a lot of other NATO countries like Poland, for example, very vulnerable, especially because of Trump's relationship with Putin, which seems to be close. That, who knows, maybe Trump would be, maybe the U.S. would not defend a Poland, for example, if they were invaded by Russia. All this remains to be seen. And the Russians, and that leads me to my next point on the Russians are definitely happy that Trump got elected. There's no question about it. Putin's already congratulated Trump, calling him brave. And we'll see if they can get a negotiated settlement done. That remains to be seen. That'll be a huge, huge deal if and when that's done. And speaking of Ukraine, we saw President Zelensky actually release a very glowing thank you to Trump, saying basically that it's great that he's back in, very, trying to kiss the ring almost, in a sense, trying to basically convince Trump to continue its support for Ukraine. And again, honestly, guys, that's what you got to do in that position. Ukrainian president needs the support of the U.S. president on all fronts. So I think he definitely would have preferred a Kamala Harris victory, but he's playing the cards he was dealt with, guys. But again, we'll see over the next 2 months, too. Who knows what will happen before the transition? Like, we could see Israel's actions against Iran ramp up, for example, before Trump even takes office. So a lot of it matters on that front also. And again, one of Trump's biggest economic policies is actually the tariffs, which also affects these European countries, guys. If it's true what Trump says, he's going to put a tariff on every single good coming into the United States, which the goal is to prioritize U.S. manufacturing and U.S. interests. This is going to very much affect a lot of foreign countries and foreign investments, and European companies, for example, like cars. It's just one. Germany, for example, cars. If you put a tariff on those cars, it's going to cause the American consumer a lot of hardship, but also the foreign companies. Now, again, if they put more trade barriers on a lot of these goods, it could disrupt trade all across the world and potentially sink a lot of these global powerful economies like Germany, France, just to name a few. So again, the economy is going to be huge as well. And we'll see whether or not Trump is alleviates sanctions against the Russians, for example, which I'm sure could be part of some sort of negotiated settlement between Ukraine and Russia. But it remains to be seen. And we'll see about, in terms of alliances also, the China front is going to be interesting, whether or not Trump escalates a sort of trade war with the Chinese, with anyone else in the region. But again, it remains to be seen, because a lot of what Trump says, a lot of it's rhetoric, and maybe his policy is different than his rhetoric. So once we actually get a formulated policy proposal, and a lot of his appointments too is going to be key, guys. Seeing who he appoints to a lot of these key policy positions. Does he go with neoconservatives like Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, or does he go with a more paleoconservative isolationist? Like, who knows? But we'll see. We'll see. And it remains to be seen. And once we get those appointments, guys, we'll get back to you. He appointed Susie Wiles as chief of staff, first female chief of staff, which is super interesting. Seems like she runs a tight ship. She was campaign manager for Trump. But we'll see. And on their foreign policy front, it's very mixed, guys. Some countries like it. The Europeans probably not so much. The Russians definitely do. Ukraine not so much. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you guys for watching this video, and we'll get back to you next time we got some news. Thanks, guys.